In this video, we'll be philosophizing on the meaningfulness within quantitative thought associated with the aggregation, which is the combination within distinct numerators to be able to communicate and infer consistency, to engage well-defined, easier to access knowledge and or evaluate that knowledge in association to the meaningfulness one can derive within the distinct numerators in association to the terms one is inferring, specific cause-effect dynamic to associate knowledge, to infer distinct effects and or causations within numeric operations. For example, if one is interested in being able to engage more meaningful conducts in which one is going to do something with paint, in terms of being able to paint a wheelbarrow with distinct images, a certain amount of paint satisfies the as it must be good enough and necessary conditions. Painting the entire wheelbarrow exists in relation to one's direction of desired effect to paint specific images with distinct pigments to be able to communicate distinct intrinsic processes and or properties with visual representation, drawing from different paints with distinct browns, greens, reds, yellows, and only the brown, greens, reds, and yellows, to be able to engage more of a creative practice. Yet one has thought prior, they want the whole background to be a nice beautiful brown with some orange to create a nice color complexion one typically sees when they go out for a walk. It's quite nice to go on a dirt trail and see these orange pop out in terms of the plants, and even sometimes the acorns that have a sort of brown tinge to it. And so one is inspired by that, and so they think, okay, I'm going to go paint my wheelbarrow. It's going to be brown with some oranges to stand out, and I'm going to have some greens and some reds in there just to give it some sort of natural sort of overtones. And one knows that they need less yellows but more browns, and does not have enough browns, and the browns come in these really small brown paint jars. So one needs to add the amount of browns one's going to need to be able to paint the entire wheelbarrow, quantifying the color of brown in terms of its amount concerning the amount of paint jars one needs to be able to paint an entire wheelbarrow, and provide enough paint so there's a thick enough layer to be able to prevent one to see the prior underlayers of the wheelbarrow. And so purchases 5 small browns, yet that wasn't enough and requires quite a bit more. So in the future has to predict the amount of browns they're going to need at the least cost, concerned with the amount of money they have to spend more freely on wheelbarrow paint to be able to engage their artistic pursuit, engaging more meaningful calculations in terms of the quantifications within thinking processes, engaging not just the values meaningful to calculate the amount of paint one needs, yet also the more meaningful budget one has to be able to engage a distinct, meaningfully similar in this concern quantification within one's ration, as one wants to proportion the amount of cost there is to the expense to be able to paint the wheelbarrow, while still having enough to be able to spend on distinct pigments to engage painting the wheelbarrow with many different chromatically complex pigmentations, exploring beautiful combinations within the elegance one can paint from thinking in quantities with distinct operations connected to distinct conducts, conducting distinct calculations within the mind, thinking not just in terms of the numbers within the amount of paint one has, but the costs of those paint, and how one can obtain the amount of paints from the costs of paint and budgeting the amount one has to spend. This is distinct in terms of distinct values within one equation one could write down in terms of the amount of costs in association to the amount of paint to be able to infer in the future whether or not one can meaningfully engage in the entire painting of the wheelbarrow as one had wanted to, and satisfies an underlying psychological need to engage in creating meaning within meaning in life from moment to moment, painting that wheelbarrow to create a beautiful, elegant wheelbarrow to one's heart's desire in association to the meaningfulness one derives from painting. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one. Keep looking at those acepçãodades.